Joining us now to break down the saga with Silicon Valley is Liz Harrington, the national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. Liz, when we talk about this, it doesn't seem like anything that's necessarily too surprising. The president's talked about these type of protections for a long time. Conservatives have talked about these protections for a long time. Do you think that this is the right move by the president?
I think these tech companies that are all powerful and have so much control over our information and our free speech need to be held accountable. And there needs to be a line drawn in the sand that you're not going to be able to infringe on our First Amendment. You're not going to be able to take these outrageous bias steps against the duly elected president of the United States and then not enforce these so-called fact checks against anyone else. You know, what we worry about when we're talking about government getting involved with regulation, a lot of time we're worried about government acting like Big Brother. But when you look at these tech companies, they're in and of itself these big liberal corporations that are censoring information. They're the ones that are going after people for wrongthink. Google, YouTube, Twitter, they are now the ministry of truth. And that's the big problem here. We need fairness. We need to uphold our First Amendment. And we need to stop the bias and political actors in Silicon Valley trying to put their thumb on the scales when it comes to our elections.
And when it comes to Jack Dorsey, for example, he's been a man in the past who has been a little bit more resistant to kind of falling in line with the cancel claims, if you will, by a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people on Twitter have been calling for President Trump's whole account to be shut down altogether. He's been a little bit more lenient when it comes to that. But I think that one thing that adds to this problem is the fact that Twitter, Facebook, all these companies are located in Silicon Valley. Therefore, people are kind of in that environment to begin with. It might be a little bit more not necessarily intentional than a lot of people think. But then we see, for example, the man making the decisions at Twitter when it comes to this issue. I believe his name is Yoel Roth. He has previous tweets that are very discriminatory against the president. In fact, saying that Nazis work in the White House. So when you hear from a lot of libertarians, for example, saying that they don't want the government getting involved in these private companies, what's your response to that?
Well, I think we have to look at the special treatment these companies have gotten for decades under Section 230. But yet they act like a publisher, like a news outlet, and they try to put their thumb on the scale and fact check and flag content for being potentially false or misleading. They are acting as a publisher, so they shouldn't have that special status that they've enjoyed from the government that's allowed them to become so powerful in this space. So, and when you talk about integrity, so the guy in charge of integrity at Twitter thinks that 63 million Americans are deplorable and irredeemable. I mean, it's the same thing that all these Democrats have slandered us for years, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that, of course, when they come out with their bias, it's always going to go one way, and it's going to go against Republicans, and it's going to go against conservatives. It needs to be called out, and it needs to put a stop. We need to put a stop to it.
And I hear a lot of conservatives make that argument too, essentially against those libertarian-minded individuals, saying if we don't address this now, we won't have a platform to even have this conversation. We won't even be involved in the dialogue when we talk about reining in these media companies, because it's not only those on the right who are having this argument. I mean, Senator Elizabeth Warren wanted to break up some of these companies when she was running in the primary, and it's something that a lot of Democrats even say. And now we hear people like Senator Josh Hawley saying that he wants to do something similar. So I think that if they're not involved in the conversation and they don't do something right now, they won't have a voice when there is action eventually taken. But before I let you go, the president is also saying that he's putting together a commission to look at conservative bias in particular, in addition to the step that he's taken with the executive order. Do you think that this is the beginning of a movement when it comes to this issue?
Absolutely. And I think it's really chilling. The most chilling part about all of this is how these companies do not want free debate. They don't want free thought. They don't want open debate. Their first impulse, aside from our Twitter and Mr. Integrity over at Twitter, is to call you racist. But the second impulse is to censor your wrongthink altogether. And we've seen it throughout this pandemic, and we've seen it across all platforms, whether it's YouTube censoring stuff that goes out of bounds of the World Health Organization because it's, quote, problematic information. Well, nothing could have been more problematic than the World Health Organization shilling for communist China and saying this virus couldn't spread human to human. Facebook was censoring First Amendment gatherings who were protesting, trying to organize protests on their platform against these draconian lockdowns. This is very chilling. It's anti-American, and this is the beginning of the conversation because we want free and open debate. We don't want bias and censorship and this Orwellian behavior that we see too often from these corporations in Silicon Valley.
And just yesterday, we saw a Chinese spokesperson actually get that same notification added to his tweet saying that what he was saying was false. But that only came in response to people on Twitter voicing their concerns about this bias. So it shows you that the company is willing to listen if the voices are loud enough. And I think when it comes to this issue, too, it's not a matter of just leaving Twitter. I don't think that's a plausible solution. I don't think I hear Parler, Gab. The problem isn't free market enterprise here. The problem is that this company is a monopoly, and it's voicing that power in order to really skew it against one type of politics based on that viewpoint. I think that's the issue here that people need to understand. But Liz Harrington, I really appreciate you coming on tonight, breaking down this issue for us. Thank you.